The cold didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, the way bad things usually do. Through the cracks in a car window that wouldn't seal right anymore. Through a thin blanket I'd found folded on a park bench 3 weeks before. Through a life I no longer recognized as mine. I was 63 years old. I had spent 31 years teaching 4th grade at Riverside Elementary in Dayton, Ohio. I had raised 2 children in a house I'd paid off with my own hands, literally because I'd refinished every floor in that place myself on my knees with a sander the summer my husband passed. I had a pension. I had a retirement account. I had a plan, and then I didn't. I was sleeping in my 2009 Honda Civic in the parking lot of a Walmart off Route 35, and I had been for 11 days. I want to explain how a 63-year-old retired schoolteacher ends up there, because I know what you're thinking. I thought the same thing about other people before it happened to me. You assume there must have been warning signs. You assume the person made choices. And yes, I made choices. I trusted my daughter. That was the choice I made. My daughter is 41. Her name is Renee. Her husband's name is Doug. They have a nice house in Centerville, which is where I used to live too. In the house I'd owned since 1989, the house where Renee learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where she came home crying after prom because her date was a fool, where I sat with her the night she called me at 2 a.m. after her first miscarriage. That house was mine, until it wasn't. It started 3 years before any of this, when my knee surgery went badly. Not catastrophically badly. I didn't end up paralyzed or anything like that. But there were complications, then a second surgery, then a staph infection that kept me in the hospital for 6 weeks. And by the time all of that was done, my savings had taken a serious hit. Medical debt in this country doesn't care how long you taught school or how carefully you saved. It just stacks up. I was still managing. I had my pension from the district, $1,200 a month. I had Social Security, another $900. I was careful. I knew how to be careful. But my knee wasn't right. I couldn't drive long distances without pain. The house needed a new roof. The contractor quoted me $18,000. And Renee started coming around more, which I should have appreciated and did for a while. She brought dinner. She helped me sort through paperwork. She sat with me at the kitchen table and went through my finances with a legal pad and a calculator. And she said, "Mom, I'm worried about you." I believed her, because she was my daughter, because I had nursed that woman through every hard thing in her life, and I could not imagine she would do to me what she did. She suggested I sign a power of attorney. "Just temporary," she said. "Just while your knee was still giving you trouble and you couldn't always get to the bank easily. Just to make things easier," she said. And then she suggested that if I transferred the house into a joint account, not hers, she said ours, it would simplify things for after, whenever that was. She said the word estate. She said the word estate. She said the word probate. She said the word easier about 14 more times. I signed the papers. My own daughter sat across from me at my own kitchen table, and I signed papers I should have had a lawyer look at. And I didn't have a lawyer look at them because she was my daughter and because I was still on pain medication from the knee and because she said it was just paperwork. 8 months later, she told me the house had to be sold. There was a lien, she said, from the medical debt. She'd tried to handle it, but it had gotten complicated. Doug had an investment opportunity that would fix everything, but they needed liquidity now. She showed me papers I didn't fully understand. She cried. She said she was so sorry, that she had tried to protect me and failed, that she would find me something better. I was out of my house in 45 days. The apartment they found me was in a complex in Huber Heights, small and loud, with neighbors who played music until 2 a.m. and a parking lot that flooded every time it rained more than an inch. My pension and Social Security covered the rent, barely. For food, I used coupons. For everything else, I stopped needing everything else. Then the apartment complex raised the rent. Then the regional bank where I had my direct deposit closed its Huber Heights branch, and my electronic transfer got tangled up in some kind of processing error that took 3 weeks to sort out. And in those 3 weeks, I was 2 weeks late on rent. And the complex had a zero-tolerance policy I hadn't read closely enough when I signed a lease. They evicted me on a Thursday in February. I put what I could in my car, my good winter coat, The photo albums. I grabbed the photo albums first. I don't know why, instinct probably. 30 years of faces I couldn't leave behind. My medications. 3 changes of clothes. The quilt my mother had made me when I turned 40. I drove to Renee's house. I sat in her driveway for 20 minutes before I knocked. Doug answered the door. He told me Renee wasn't home. He told me they didn't have room. He told me he was sorry about my situation. Then he closed the door. I have replayed that moment many times since then. The porch light was on. I could see the ceramic rooster Renee had on the front step, the one I'd bought her at a craft fair in Yellow Springs the summer before everything fell apart. I looked at that rooster for a long time. Then I got back in my car. That was 11 days before the Walmart parking lot. I moved around, different lots, different streets, trying not to stay anywhere long enough to attract attention. I had $46 left. My phone was about to lose service. I had not called my son, who lived in Portland and who I had not spoken to in 2 years because of something that started as a misunderstanding about Thanksgiving and grew into something neither of us had ever figured out how to cross back over. I had not called anyone. I was too ashamed. I had spent 31 years being the person other people leaned on, and I did not know how to be anything else. And then my brother found me. Not in some dramatic way. He didn't sweep in and recognize me from a distance. What happened was smaller and stranger than that. His wife, my sister-in-law Peggy, had been trying to reach me for weeks. She'd called the apartment number I'd given them at Christmas and got a disconnected message. She'd emailed, but I hadn't checked email since my phone data ran out. She'd asked Renee, who told her I was fine and traveling, which was such an obvious lie I almost laughed when I found out later. Peggy is relentless when she decides to be. She started calling hospitals. She called the school district to ask if anyone was still in touch with me. She eventually reached a woman I used to teach with, Donna, who had seen my car in the Walmart lot 2 nights earlier when she'd stopped for milk, and who had thought she recognized it but told herself she must be wrong, because why would I be sleeping in my car? My brother's name is Walter. He is 68, 5 years older than me, and he is not a wealthy man. He ran an HVAC business for 30 years in Columbus, and he sold it when he retired and lives comfortably, not extravagantly. But he drove 90 minutes to Dayton at 7 in the morning on a Wednesday, and he walked across that parking lot and he knocked on my car window, and when I looked up and saw his face, I burst into tears before I could stop myself. He didn't say, "I told you so." He had said years earlier that Renee made him uneasy, that he noticed how she always seemed to be doing you favors that somehow ended up benefiting her. He had said it once, carefully, and I had defended her, and he had never said it again. But he didn't bring it up then in that parking lot. He just said, "Let's get you some breakfast, and then you're coming home with us." I want to tell you what it felt like to sit in his truck and feel the heat from the vents. It sounds like nothing. It was everything. I had forgotten what it felt like to be warm without working at it. Peggy had the guest room ready. She'd made it up with extra blankets, and there were fresh towels on the bed, and she didn't make a big deal out of any of it. Just said, "You know where everything is," as if I'd been coming and going from their house my whole life, which I hadn't nearly enough. I slept for 14 hours. Over the next 2 days, Walter sat with me at his kitchen table, and we went through everything. He has a friend who is a real estate attorney. Not the kind of friend you call at 7 in the morning necessarily, but the kind who takes the call anyway. Her name is Gail, and she spent an hour on the phone with me that first weekend, and then spent several more hours looking at the documents I'd signed, and what she found made her quiet in a way that told me it was bad before she said a word. The power of attorney I had signed was not limited in the way Renee had described. The property transfer had been structured to give Renee and Doug effective control of the asset while keeping my name on the mortgage, meaning I stayed liable for the debt while losing the benefit. The sale of the house had generated just over $200,000 in equity. I'd received none of it. Gail said words like elder financial abuse and civil remedy and potential criminal exposure. She said it quietly, the way you say things that are true and terrible. I thought about Renee crying at my kitchen table. I thought about how convincingly she had cried. Walter wanted to call the police immediately. I asked him to wait, not because I wanted to protect Renee. I had passed that point somewhere on a February night in a Walmart parking lot, but because I wanted to understand the full picture first. Gail agreed that was wise. She said we would have one shot to do this right. What I did not know during those early weeks at Walter and Peggy's house was that Walter had already done more than I realized. He had quietly reached out to my son in Portland. He had sent him a message. Not accusatory, not dramatic, just the facts. Your mother is here. This is what happened. I thought you should know. My son called me on a Tuesday evening. His name is Marcus. He's 38, and he sounds like his father on the phone, the same cadence. And when I heard his voice, I had to sit down. He said, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't there." We both cried. We didn't resolve the Thanksgiving thing that night, but we stayed on the phone for 2 hours, and somewhere in those 2 hours, it stopped mattering the way it had. He flew in from Portland 3 weeks later. He is a software engineer, and he is careful with money in a way I apparently was not, and he had looked into the situation before he arrived. He had done his own research. He walked into Walter's kitchen with a folder and a very calm expression that I recognized as his serious face, the one he'd had since he was about 9 years old and had decided something needed to be handled. He said, "Mom, we're going to fix this, but I need you to let us do it right." The legal process took 4 months. I won't take you through every detail because most of it was sitting and waiting while Gail and a colleague of hers filed motions and made calls and sent certified letters. What I can tell you is that the combination of the documented financial transactions, the power of attorney that had been used far beyond its intended scope, and testimony from Donna and 2 other people who had witnessed my living situation, it was enough. More than enough, Gail said. Renee hired a lawyer. Of course she did. Doug apparently told her it would all blow over. It did not blow over. The settlement included the return of the equity from the house sale plus damages. My son set up a trust, an actual trust, with a proper trustee, structured so that no single person had unilateral control over anything. Gail helped draft it. It took several weeks to finalize, and he checked every line. During those months, Walter refinished the basement of his house and put in a small apartment. Nothing fancy, just a bedroom and a sitting area with its own entrance, so I would have privacy. He said it was an improvement he'd been meaning to make for years anyway. I know he did it for me. I didn't argue with him about it. I just helped Peggy plant the flower beds along the back fence in the spring, and I made them dinner twice a week, and I tried to figure out who I was now. That is the part no one talks about much. When the legal situation is resolved and the money is in the trust and your son is calling every Sunday and you are warm and safe and fed, there is still this question of what you do with yourself. 31 years of teaching, a life that had a shape, and then the shape was gone. And here was all this open space. I started volunteering at the elementary school near Walter's house. Not teaching, just reading with kids in the library on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, kids who needed a little extra time with someone who wasn't in a hurry. There's a boy named Theo who is 7 and reads like he's fighting with the words on the page, so stubborn and so earnest about it. And the first time he finished a whole picture book without stopping, I thought I was going to cry in the middle of the school library. I held it together. Mostly. I also started writing things down. Not for any particular reason, not with a plan, not thinking anyone would ever read it, just because there was so much I had never said out loud, so much that had sat in me through those 11 days in that parking lot in the months before and after, and I needed somewhere to put it. I have said out loud what I should have said a long time ago. Walter saved my life. Not dramatically, not with a grand gesture. He drove 90 minutes on a Wednesday morning because his wife made phone calls until she found out where I was, and he didn't say "I told you so," and he refinished his basement, and he let me plant flowers in his backyard like it was mine. That is what love actually looks like. Not the love that cries at your kitchen table while stealing your house, the kind that just shows up. Marcus flew in from Portland and made a folder and used his serious face and his careful mind to make sure it was done right. I lost 2 years with my son over a misunderstanding neither of us ever knew how to get past, and then one phone call, and we found each other again. I'm not going to waste any more time. As for Renee, her lawyer negotiated. The settlement is done. I have not spoken to her since the documents were signed. I don't know if I ever will. I think about the ceramic rooster on her porch steps sometimes. I think about her coming home after that bad prom night and me sitting on the edge of her bed talking until she stopped crying. I don't know how those two things exist in the same person. Maybe I never will. What I know is this. I am 64 years old now. I have a small apartment in my brother's basement with my own entrance and a window that looks out onto the flower beds I helped plant. I have a trust that no one can touch without proper oversight. I have a son who calls me every Sunday. I have Tuesday and Thursday mornings with kids who are learning to fight through hard things. Last week, a little girl named Becca stayed after our reading session to show me a drawing she'd made. It was a woman with red hair. I have red hair, going gray, but she drew it red, sitting in the chair with a book in her lap. She said, "That's you. You're my favorite." I told her she was mine too. I drove home in a car that runs well, to a room that is warm, to a life that is mine, not the one I planned, not the one I expected, but mine. I've been thinking lately about the things we let ourselves believe because we need to believe them. I needed to believe Renee was doing all of it out of love. The dinner she brought over, the legal pad on my kitchen table, the way she said easier over and over like a word she'd practiced. I needed that to be real because she was my daughter and I had given her everything I had. Not just money, not just the house, but 30 years of showing up. Every bad night, every hard morning, I had shown up. And so I signed papers I should never have signed because the alternative, believing she was capable of that kind of calculation, was something I wasn't ready to hold. That is the thing about betrayal when it comes from someone you raised. It doesn't arrive like a stranger. It arrives wearing a face you love. It uses the exact words you would have trusted. And by the time you understand what happened, you are already in a Walmart parking lot with $46 and a quilt your mother made you, and you are 63 years old, and you are trying to figure out how a life gets to this point. Here is what I've come to understand. What Renee didn't happen because she is some kind of monster. It happened because she had been quietly making small choices for a long time, choices that put her comfort ahead of my safety, that let her tell herself a story where she was helping me, where it would all work out, where I would be fine. Each small choice made the next one easier. That is how people end up doing enormous harm without ever having a single dramatic moment where they decided to be cruel. The cruelty accumulates quietly, one rationalization at a time, and what Walter did, driving 90 minutes on a Wednesday morning, not saying I told you so, refinishing his basement so I would have privacy, that also didn't happen all at once. It happened because he had been the kind of person for 68 years who showed up when things were hard. Peggy making phone calls until she found me. My son Marcus getting on a plane with a folder and his serious face. None of that was an accident. It was the result of who they had chosen to be long before any of this happened to me. I think about the kids I read with on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Theo, who fights with every word on the page and refuses to quit. Becca, who drew me with red hair and called me her favorite. They are 7 years old and they are already building the people they will be. Every time Theo pushes through a hard sentence instead of giving up, he is practicing something. Every time someone shows up for them with patience instead of frustration, they are learning what that looks like. That is what I want to pass on now. Not a warning about paperwork, though. Please have a lawyer look at anything you sign, no matter who hands it to you. What I want to pass on is simpler than that. The life you end up with is made of the choices you make when no one is grading you. Renee made hers. Walter made his. Marcus made his. I made mine, including the ones I should not have made, the trust I gave too freely, the warnings I didn't hear. I am not the same person I was before the parking lot. I am more careful now, and not just with paperwork. More careful about what I let myself ignore, because looking at it would be uncomfortable. more careful about the people who show up quietly and consistently versus the ones who arrive with grand gestures right before they need something. My life is smaller now than it once was, and it is more honest than it has ever been. I will take that.